Okay. I was on a mission in 1972, heading into Oshaw Valley. It was roughly about 7:30 at night, and a crew had just, an aircraft had just made contact with a convoy at an intersection in Oshaw Valley. We had went into our firing orbit, and we'd fired a burst from our 40-millimeter cannons, about 6 to 8 rounds, but one of the cannons jammed, and they had a problem with the other one, so they had to quit firing. They had to reposition the barrels that catch the empty rounds and clear the one gun. That got completed, and we continued our orbit, and we was coming around for about the 5th orbit, and we fired another large burst of from our 40 millimeters on the trucks, and we had a large burst of anti-aircraft fire come up from the 6 o'clock position, probably about 15 to 20 rounds of 37 millimeter anti-aircraft fire. And just as soon as that burst of anti-aircraft fire quit, a missile was launched right behind it, so it would kind of mix in, not with, but close to the proximity of the anti-aircraft rounds. And I called a missile launch, and I was calling the anti-aircraft fire, and I called evasive action for the aircraft to take to try and get away from the missile. And we launched countermeasure flares, heat-seeking flares, trying to pull the missile away. The missile must have seen the flares, because it did make a slight jink, but it tracked back on the aircraft just in a second or so. And the missile came up on its trajectory, came right down the right side of the airplane, eyeball level with me, and went in and struck between the number 3 engine and the fuselage into the wing. And it blew a gaping hole into the center wing fuel tank and damaged the number 3 engine. And just instantly, there was a ball of fire rolling out of the side of the airplane down past me, and was swirling and roaring back to the dark night in the back behind us, and pieces of the plane flew off. And I called to the pilot and told him it was badly damaged, we were on fire. The pilot called for correct heading to the nearest base for emergency landing, and the plane turned, and it was headed towards Hue, Vietnam. The base was going to land at it was in Hue, which was about 50 miles away. And the plane made its slow turn, and just within seconds after the wings leveled out, the plane started vibrating. And I had been in airplanes before that got hit, and I recognized actually the vibration, because the plane was hurt. You could tell it was hurt bad. And I told the pilot, I said, made my last phone call, or interphone call, and I told the pilot, I said, "Pilot, we're on fire bad." And just after I said that, the plane started rolling over to the left, nose slightly down, right wing coming up. And I dropped to my knees real fast. I had my parachute in my hand, my chest pack parachute. I dropped to my knees, and I rolled up in a little ball, and the plane kept rolling over to the left, and it started getting steeper nose down, and I knew the airplane was going out of control, and was virtually, it was dying. And I started trying to push myself out of the airplane with my feet rolled up in a ball on the edge of the ramp of the plane, and the centrifugal force was building up on me to the point it was really taking all of my strength to get my body to start moving over the edge of the ramp. I finally got my body to the point where my weight and the momentum of my rear movement was past the center of gravity, and I started actually rolling outside the airplane when something in the rear of the airplane made a loud pop. And all of a sudden, a hot breath of air hit me, shot me outside the airplane, bounced me off the tail, and spun me out into the night, dark night. Darkness came instantly. I was rolled up in a ball. I had 300 parachute jumps, so I knew how to control my body to get where I wanted. So I got my body positioned so I was falling back to earth, and I was looking up like this. I was looking straight up, and I noticed I didn't have no parachute on my chest. It wasn't there, and the sensation of that was overwhelming, because what run through my mind is, you're going to die. This is it. You're done. You're going to die. And I straightened myself out a little bit, and I was just sitting there, or laying cushioned by the air, and I was whirling through the air, and it'd been about probably 15, maybe 20 seconds, and all of a sudden I felt something bouncing off of my helmet up here, off top of my helmet like this. And I reach up here, and somehow the left eye hook on the back of the parachute had snapped through my parachute harness, and it had broke loose from a harness, and it had come, and it was up here bouncing off my helmet like this. And I reached up there, and that's my parachute. It's there, you know. And I was able to, feeling around, trying to find where the ripcord was. It wasn't where it was supposed to be. And I had to get the parachute and get a hold of the ripcord, and I just, without thinking, without any emotion, I just jerked the ripcord. And the parachute opened with such violence that it snapped my head back, and my helmet snapped into my shoulder blades in the back here, and the parachute it was just a violent opening, and I come to sudden fast stop, and I looked up instantly to see if my parachute was okay. But what caught my mind more than the parachute was all of the debris from the airplane. It exploded not too far from me, and the air was just full of debris, smoke, pieces of plane falling, fluttering, the softer stuff fluttering through the air, and the plane was still headed towards the ground on fire in 2 to 3 great big fireballs. And it hit the ground below me and exploded and started burning. And I rechecked my parachute, looked up, and my parachute was okay. It was non-controllable. I couldn't control it because I just had one harness strap on, but I was hanging, and this was pulling me up like this, way up on my left shoulder, and I was kind of like this, and my parachute was going at an angle to the ground, down, and I was actually going away from the burning airplane over a small hill, small sized mountain. I looked down below me, and I seen one other parachute below me, and it was close to the fire, and it was probably about 1,500 feet in the air, and it was drifting actually over the top of the fire to the other side into the forest where there was no fire start, pieces of plane burning. And I could look out to my left side, and I could see way north, or way Vietnam, still in the horizon. I hadn't drifted below the mountains yet, but I could see the city out there with the lights on and everything. And that's as I kept descending, the city would get lower on the crest of the mountain, and finally it just disappeared behind the mountains as I came on down. I got ready for a parachute landing, and I did what we was taught in survival school and everything. Got in position because I seen I was going to crash right straight through the trees, and I rolled up and tucked up and everything, and I crashed through the trees and came to a sudden stop, and I was hanging there, and I looked up, and my parachute was all wrapped up in the limbs of the trees and everything, and I actually just went like this to see if I was on any limbs and everything, and my feet was about 6 inches off the ground. I had stopped about 6 inches above the ground, and I kind of bounced down till I was solid on the ground, because they always taught you, hey, make sure you're not standing on a limb and you unsnap from your parachute, you fall 30 feet, you know. But I made sure I was on the ground, unsnapped my parachute. My left leg, I had been the one that got caught on the back of the airplane, and that's basically the leg that got damaged, flipped, and bounced me off the tail of the airplane. I had cuts all on my left arm, bleeding from this arm, and I got down, I took all my equipment off. I took the harness, took my helmet off. I took my night winter flying gear off, and I got ready to leave the area, move away from the area, and get in a position where I could hide and escape and evade until rescue started the next morning. And it was a nighttime of dodging North Vietnamese soldiers, mainly early in the morning, listening to the airplane burning and the munition exploding. It burnt and exploded almost all night. I could hear it sound. I guess the North Vietnamese had dogs, because we could hear dogs moving about way down below me. I could hear dogs. And when early morning came, they told us that there'd be an early morning SAR, and it'd been thunderstorms all night and raining and everything. It was all wet and everything. But I was hid under some very heavy foliage and thought I was hit pretty good. And all of a sudden I hear movement in the woods. And this is kind of where my training from the mountains come in, because I'm from North Carolina, up in the mountains. And I was taught to stalk deer, hunt deer and everything. And I realized, and I could tell instantly, that somebody had moved into the area, because the birds, the animals, everything went quiet. It just got silence. They say it was deafening silent. And I froze, and my adrenaline shot out of sight. And I had adrenaline rush that it just supercharged me. and I heard this movement to my right side, and I was laying kind of back with brush around me, covered up with everything I could get packed in around me, with just my face, so I could see my face a little clearer, so I could see out this small opening I had created. And here come a North Vietnamese soldier right behind me, or he was probably about 10 yards away from me, and he was headed from my right to my left, and he's carrying an AK-47, and he was just looking around, kind of casually. He was just walking, looking like he was trying to flush somebody, you know. And I kept watching him, and he turned. And I don't know if I made a noise or what, but he turned, and I swear he looked straight into my eyes. Me and him was eyeball to eyeball with each other. And he kind of, okay, stop your thing just a second.